The Biology of Trauma, in the second of the Biology of Depression series by Melodie Dupuis. Trauma is experiencing a profound loss, such as losing the control that comes with a safe routine, losing the ability to predict with confidence one's safety, losing a loved one, losing a sense of self from being victimized, which are only a few of the examples that provoke very strong feelings that can overwhelm us. Trauma affects our fear systems. It's important to understand that trauma is both a physical and emotional experience. They can't be separated because it would be like saying that the brain works independently of our bodies. To give an example of this would be to ask yourself, when you feel emotionally overwhelmed, where on your body do you feel the tension? Everyone will have a unique response because we are unique. I feel it in my sternum. I can actually lose my breath when the feelings are overpowering. The hundreds of people that I have asked to locate their tension on their body, the responses have been varied and surprising. But what is important to understand is that your brain is responding to trauma and sending messages to the body in preparation for flight, fight, or freeze. For some reason, evolutionarily, over time, we have lost the ability to consciously recognize emotional tension in our bodies, which is the body's signal to alert and protect from trauma. Alan Jasanoff, a Harvard scientist, wrote in 2018 in his book, Biological Mind, How Brain, Body, and Environment Collaborate to Make Us Who We Are. He wrote, all emotions, not just anxiety, are linked to extracerebral bodily changes and bodily sensations. We say that our guts are wrenched by sorrow, our hearts throb with love, our blood boils in anger, and so on. Although these phrases are largely figurative, they also reflect underlying physiological reality. Emotional trauma impacts the physical body, and physical trauma impacts the emotional body. I have used the analogy of the brain as bruised from trauma, and the hemorrhaging needs to be absorbed to avoid calcification. This is no different than a muscle-sustaining injury and the body absorbing the blood from the injured area to avoid calcification. Emotional trauma has the same principles working. The brain, working in tandem with the body, needs to manage the emotional trauma to avoid mental health challenges from not absorbing or managing the emotional traumatic feelings with success. Emotional trauma is being forced to manage an event that occurs without your consent or consultation. It feels grossly unfair and rarely predictable. Part of the emotional trauma is the unexpectedness of the event that contributes to the overwhelming feelings. At the core of emotional trauma is the profound feeling of loss of control over one's emotional physical safety. What we knew and understood is no longer a reality, whether it is about our physical or emotional social worlds. Therefore, a toolbox of skills is needed to manage the fallout of emotional trauma. Peer support is the best guarantee of success, but it helps to have the knowledge and emotional skills to work through the pain of reframing a new reality. Understanding that the process is predictable helps. The first reaction to trauma is denial. This can be happening. This can't be happening. This no. Then recognizing the profound unfairness comes next. Finally accepting the profound sadness that has come with the reframing of life itself, whether you want it or not. These three mindsets are fluid and will be a constant during the healing process. In other words, denial will be part of the whole process. Anger at the unfairness provides the emotional energy needed to eventually accept the deep-rooted pain of the loss. Everyone is unique, and everyone will uniquely work through the process of healing from trauma. It is important to not judge but understand and accept the feelings that come with managing emotional trauma. Time is not rigid, and each person will need to take their own time to realize their trauma management. To complicate an already complex process, the success of managing emotional trauma is impacted by the resilience of the individual, their childhood experiences, the time in their life they are traumatized, and then the trauma itself. To the surprise of many survivors, the actual event has less effect or impact than the other elements that will determine success in managing emotional trauma. Therefore, it is really important to have the emotional skills and peer support to work through trauma. Statistics have shown that peer support, whether it is family, friends, or colleagues, plays a significant role in the success of the individual working through trauma. This comes as no surprise, considering that humans are animals hardwired to belong to a social group. Without this instinct, we would perish. Tali Sharot is a professor of cognitive neuroscience who wrote in her book Influential Mind in 2017. The message, perhaps ironically, is that to influence actions, you need to give people a sense of control. Eliminate the sense of agency, which is empowerment, and you get anger, frustration, and resistance. Expand people's sense of influence over their world, and you increase their motivation and compliance. Giving people a choice, even if it is just a hypothetical one, is enough to enhance their sense of control, and control motivates people. So the importance of authentic and skilled peer support is the foundation for success and the most influential part of healing, because we can't do it alone. It's a lot to ask of a traumatized individual to find a network of support when they are traumatized. Regrettably, this occurs more often than not. Society actually admires a person who is stoic and not emotional when managing emotional trauma. It is counterproductive and could lead to fatalities. Therefore, it's not surprising when trauma creates more trauma in our culture. The emotional skills that support traumatic healing are self-talk and self-awareness. Trauma impacts the whole person, and so it is important the traumatized individual work extra hard on physically providing for their body and brain that are working extremely hard to manage the trauma, eating nutritious food, physically using the body to support the emotional energy needed, and committing to a social, emotional environment that is supportive and not challenging. Idealistic? Yes, but this is paramount for a traumatized person to recover and thrive after healing. Acknowledging and accepting a traumatized person's feelings is the foundation of success in healing. Life happens, and there are no guidelines to provide direction, let alone structure, in dealing with trauma. Understanding and supporting the three mindsets, denial, anger, and acceptance, are a fundamental part of the healing by both the traumatized individual and the peer support. Having a peer support group to validate and support daily recovery is critical. Unfortunately, this is where our society falls down. Resources are scarce or non-existent, especially in rural areas. Until our tax dollars are used to provide creditable and credentialed resources equitably in our country, which is the second largest country in the world, it tells us that we will always have challenges with community resources because of the physical distances and, sadly, the government's historical dismal track record to meet this challenge. The most important idea to take away from this information is to understand the importance of peer support and that trauma is never negotiated. Therefore, it is always traumatic. Medical support may sometimes be needed, but it cannot sustain or maintain the support needed to an individual trying to manage trauma. Medical support, even mental health support, cannot provide the crucial support because medical is only one-dimensional and trauma is multidimensional. Social, emotional, and sometimes financial support is paramount when managing trauma. Family, friends, employers, and medical support may all be needed. Trauma is not isolated. Therefore, isolation is dangerous when managing trauma. The more informed we are about managing trauma, the more successful we will be in reframing life after